Well, aw shucks. It does seem that brat summer's over. And I didn't even get a chance to do cocaine. No, come back to me. Oh man, well, yeah, at least we got to have the fun times we did. Yeah, you know, I got to do some squats. I gave a 10. I got to give a 10 on an album. Drake and Kendrick Lamar beefed, and Drake sent me a nice message saying, "Hey, dear Anthony, I thought that you covered the beef really good. Here's a vegan pancake recipe that I think you'd really enjoy." And I sent him a picture of my ass. I mean, it's been looking good since the squats, and he seemed to enjoy it. Okay, the time for intros are done. It's time for arguing, yeah! Yep, that's it. Another episode of Let's Argue, where I hop online, I take your hot takes, your unpopular opinions, your tough questions, I respond to the best ones in this video. That's literally what we're doing. Let's do it! Pop music doesn't need Taylor Swift anymore. Artists like Billie, Sabrina, and Charlie have made better pop albums this year than her. Yeah, I do think all those artists made better pop albums, but simultaneously, I don't really think Taylor Swift cares about being there for pop music per se. Yeah, I don't think Taylor has any interest at this point in terms of like being a defining pop artist or influencing the pop scene on the whole. I mean, if you look at the quality of her writing instrumentally and lyrically, clearly Taylor is only interested at this point in just like kind of feeding the lore, feeding the parasocial cult that we are currently calling her audience. Like, there's no Shake It Off, for example, on Taylor's new record. Taylor is not making music anymore that is meant to appeal far beyond her audience. She's just focusing on feeding that very passionate niche of people who are obsessed with her so much they will just stream her music forever because they're not really exposing themselves to much of anything else other than, I don't know, maybe right now Gracie Abrams, who literally just writes bad Taylor Swift and Lorde combo songs. But yeah, I don't think Taylor has any interest in feeding pop music as like a scene or a culture anymore. She's just interested in feeding the Taylorverse. Weezer having dorky, unlistenable albums like Raditude in their discography is good, actually. Ever since their debut, they've embraced their dorkiness, and having a wildly inconsistent discography makes them still feel like underdogs, even as a highly successful band. I don't know if I fully agree with the progression here, because on Maldroid as well as Pinkerton, I would say the band was like taking themselves pretty seriously, relatively seriously. I mean, not every Weezer album provably is all about like, you know, dorky, tee-hee type fun. But with that being said, I guess I do agree with your point to a degree. The fact that the band's discography over the years has proven to be so wildly inconsistent, and with a new Weezer album, you don't know if you're gonna get like pure trash or if you're going to get like one of the best records they've dropped in a long time. It does certainly keep things exciting, and you know, you can really look back on their catalog, and even if you do see a bunch of albums you never want to listen to again, you can kind of look at them and just be like, oh yeah, I remember the horrible time that I had with that album. Memories! The streaming model will likely collapse within the next decade if prices aren't raised significantly. The deal is just too good, and neither corporations nor artists are happy with it. I think very provably corporations are pretty happy with it. The record labels are making money hand over fist now. Big profits in their pockets. Big profits as well for the CEOs of these streaming companies too. And I guarantee you, if the labels and corporations were not happy with this deal, it would be rearranged in a heartbeat. And yet it isn't. The party that is really kind of getting screwed in the whole deal is artists. Really, because there's no gate, there's no barrier to entry anymore at this point. And as a result, I feel like streaming services presume that if some artist decides to opt out of uploading their music to their platform, there's going to be 200 other artists that will be willing to do so instead and will upload their stuff left of the platform, and their music will just get streamed by audiences. Like, I do agree with what you're saying to an extent, because I don't think for artists long term this model is all that sustainable. Because if the amount of money you can make off your music gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, the only people who are going to be making music in the next 10 to 15 years
are just fucking nepo babies.
But yeah, I feel like the only way we're actually going to see this turn around is if artists get together and collectively strike against these music streaming services and take their music off of them or refuse to upload music onto them. And it all needs to be done at once together as a group. Like, that's going to be the only way to twist the arms of the labels and these platforms. Fingers crossed that it happens at some point. If Kurt Cobain still alive, Nirvana would be the greatest band of all time. I think what you're trying to say here, to some degree, is like Nirvana would be even better if they continued as a band and were still hopefully even functional today. And I don't know, that's kind of a difficult argument to make, especially considering like pretty much every single one of Nirvana's contemporaries, artistically speaking, fell off to one degree or another in the time since the early to mid 90s. Even bands that had really great players and songwriters in their roster, even bands that had multiple classics under their belts. I mean, as a 90s kid, there is nothing that could have prepared me for how mid these new Smashing Pumpkins albums are. And while I'm not out here predicting that new Nirvana albums in 2024 would have like been trash per se, I think the band, just like any other group of rock playing humans that came out of that decade, they're still people, and they still would have been like subject to aesthetic changes and trends. They would still be facing the same downturn in popularity of rock music today that pretty much every great band during that era and during the 2000s too are currently facing. Chappell Roan is another generic pop artist. Even as somebody who was not super impressed with Chappell early on, and also sort of sees her sometimes as somebody who's drowning in her influences a little bit, I can't name like 8, 9 other pop artists who sound or look or present themselves exactly like Chappell Roan on the pop scene today. By what metric are you saying she's just like a generic pop artist? Like, again, even if she's not putting the most unique spin on the types of new wave or, you know, Cyndi Lauper type stuff, or, I don't know, queer dance pop, all of that stuff, or pop rock. Again, even if she's not like redefining all of these sounds within the confines of her album, I can't really think of any other artists who are nearly as popular as she is right now, who are pulling from these same influences and doing it as big, doing it with songs that are as compelling as the ones that she's dropping. So again, generic how? Generic where? Do we know what the word generic means? If you want an example of something that is generic, I would sample the 2 new Katy Perry singles that, honestly, if you didn't tell me those were Katy Perry songs, I would have no earthly idea, because they really are that dime a dozen. They really are that average aesthetically and vocally. I feel like you're just saying this to be different, but you're not. This is just a generic take. Love your channel, but many of your reviews are just summarizing the songs on an album and giving it a score. Where's the human connection to the form? How are you as a critic pulling the humanity out of the music in doing so, drawing a parallel to your experience? First off, I'm not just simply giving rundowns of the songs. I'm kind of talking about aspects of those songs that I like or dislike, or talking about how they all kind of come together as a whole, if they in fact do. Very recent examples would include the new Magdalena Bay review that I did, or the new Nails review that I did, where I talk about how various themes throughout the tracks on the album tie together as one kind of focused, cohesive thing, while also, again, talking about qualities of the music or production or performances that I think are special or stand out or impressive or make these albums important, significant in some way, but also the human connection to the form. By sitting here and telling you about what I love about the music and expressing my passion for it, am I not showing you some kind of human connection to it? And also, like, drawing a parallel to my experience. I can't think of a faster way to make a review pointless, boring, and stupid than to try to find ways desperately to draw something that I'm hearing in the music to my experience. Like, oh, this thing on this album reminds me of myself and this thing that happened to me. Let me tell you a little story. I mean, I know there are some reviewers and writers who kind of operate in that way, and that's their mode of doing things, and that's fine, but believe me, it's not mine. Not only because I think that sort of thing is kind of pointless in most cases, outside of the rare occasion where I actually do think maybe my own personal experience might be important here, but for the most part, in my view, it isn't, and some of my favorite albums of all time are based on or are influenced by experiences that I have no connection to whatsoever. Like, you're telling me I'm supposed to sit here and tell you how great T-Pab is or Sinner Get Ready is based on how I draw my own personal experience to it? Again, those albums deal in experiences and perspectives that I have no connection to myself, and I would be an idiot to sit here and pretend like I have the capacity to speak to you from those perspectives in my review. In fact, what I feel like is more important is allow the perspectives that are being shared on those records to speak for themselves. There are no redeemable qualities to Sexyy Red's music and image. I disagree. A lot of her songs are quite catchy, and she is very funny. In fact, Sexyy Red is quite hilarious, in my opinion, and I feel like the mere fact that she has the capacity to, like shooting fish in a barrel, just upset middle-brow morons who think they're smarter than her, brings a lot of value. I've said this before and I'll say it again, like, to me, there is no quicker way to understand, like, who's an idiot and who's not than seeing who's, like, really upset at Sexyy Red on the internet. If you see somebody who's, like, really mad about Sexyy Red in a comment section or like on camera or whatever, that person's dumb. That person's stupid. That's a moron. Every fucking time, I guarantee you, that is a man, and it's most likely a man, who is not as smart as he thinks he is. I think I'm going to leave it there. That is going to be this episode of Let's Argue. Thank you very much for coming through and arguing with me. You guys are the best. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or a link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, argue forever.